Canelo Alvarez fight week. John Ryder's a legit opponent. The face of boxing is back. 50 to 60,000 fans in Guadalajara, Mexico. Should be a great event. We're going to talk about it. A lot of stuff, and Ryan Garcia splitting ways with Joe Goosen on top of some William Zepeda thoughts. We'll get into that in a minute. Enjoy the intro. Let's go. It's fight week. Let's talk about it. And let's get some people up in the chat. Team Batman Boxing is in the building. JC is here. Chauncey Pearls, welcome back. Buenos dias to you as well. Jesus M. Fight week. And Jesus M says, not pumped for fight card is very low. And there's going to be a lot of that this week. And I'm going to just give my thoughts on all of this. And I think I'm going to come out in the middle, as I generally do on stuff when it comes to a lot of that stuff. Appreciate Serge, usually in the archives, but appreciate you coming through. And for the people who, most of you, 80% of you will be watching this in the archives, make sure to be leaving your comments below. And also, if you do one thing for me, hit that like button, whether you are live currently in the chat or in the archive. Make sure to hit that like button for me, and I appreciate that. Logan Little coming through. And also Andre Rodriguez, good afternoon to you. Good late morning here in the South to you as well. Looking forward to this Canelo fight. Be back on form. Correct. And I'm going to be talking a lot about Canelo. First of all, I want to apologize for the show yesterday. There was a lot of technical difficulties. I fell off the show a handful of times. Internet was not working for me yesterday. And I think I figured out those problems. So we should have a good intact show today. It should go a lot smoother, and I want to get my thoughts out there. Just a couple of thoughts from what I had yesterday that I wasn't able to get in due to the technical difficulties we were having. The Boxing Biz in here and Santeo Media coming through. I appreciate you coming through, brother. And first of all, before I get into Canelo, there's going to be breaking news dropping. It just dropped. Coppinger just dropped it. Ryan Garcia and Joe Goosen have split, which we expected, right? If you know, you expected that coming. This will be the second split he's had with the trainer, only 24 years old. And I'll get into my thoughts on that before we get into Canelo. But before we get into that, I also wanted to wrap up my thoughts on William Zepeda. I thought it was a great performance from Zepeda, much like the performances we've seen from Zepeda in the past against an opponent he should have done that against. So he did what he was supposed to do. The detractions I have are there seems to be a disconnect between how they're promoting him and the public. It's not delivering, unfortunately. It's not getting to the delivery zone. So when I see this guy fight in Arlington in an empty arena, it hurts me. It hurts me because this is one of the most dynamic and exciting fighters in the sport. He's everything that's right about the sport. He just goes for knockouts. He throws a lot of punches. He's an action fighter, and action fighters should have people watching him, both in the arena and both on TV. They shouldn't be fighting in empty arenas. The ratings should be good. So there's a disconnect there. I don't know if Golden Boy is not doing the correct things in promoting this guy. Street teams, putting the fights in the correct places. I don't know what it is, but they need to get that together because this is a hidden gem of a fighter, and William Zepeda should be fighting in front of more people. And on top of that, follow the Arturo Gatti blueprint. Simply fight him and keep him active as long as possible. 3-4 times per year. And when those big fights present themselves, you simply fight the fights. And that's it. If it's a Shakur Stevenson, you fight that fight. You fight the fight. And that's it. I mean, if he loses to a Shakur Stevenson, it's fine. It's fine. You fought the fight, you lost the fight, and it falls, but you go right back to the main plan, which is delivering this guy as an action fighter, fighting him as many times as possible, keeping him in people's faces, delivering highlight reel KOs like he did Saturday night, and then the people will come over time. But what you do not do is bury this guy where he doesn't belong fighting, not fight him often. You need to be fighting this guy often. What's up, my brother? Canelo is the real face of boxing that he is. And I'll get into that as well, why we shouldn't get too much in the weeds with that, but why we use it to sort of troll the people out there, the Canelo haters, I call them. And I'll get into what's the difference between a Canelo detractor and a Canelo hater, because we'll be addressing the Canelo haters today, not the detractors. The detractors, it's fair. It's fair. And the difference between them is the but ... at the end of a sentence. And I'll give my thoughts on that. The Zepeda fight was a big mismatch. It was, but you just keep that guy busy and you keep him mowing guys down until those big fights present themselves. Canelo, the UK destroyer, boxing biz in the building. Canelo, a living legend. Enjoy home while he's still here. Won't be many guys having 63 fights, let alone beating the amount of champions while still yet to hit the canvas. Crazy stat. That is a crazy stat. If he knocks out John Ryder on Saturday, it'll be his 40th knockout. A lot of these guys don't have 40 fights. Canelo, if he gets a knockout this weekend, he'll have his 40th knockout. On top of that, much like you just said, the guy doesn't hit the canvas. Granted chin. Against the opposition this guy has faced, Golovkin, 36 rounds. Kovalev, 11 rounds. So he's been, 47 rounds with Golovkin and Kovalev and didn't hit the canvas. And this is what I talk about with the detractors and the haters. The difference between them is the haters will never throw out that stat. The detractors will say something like, yeah, the catch weights and, he put a rehydration clause on this guy. And, I wanted him to face this guy at this time. And all that's fair, right? But then they'll say, but he's a net positive. He's great for the sport. That's what a detractor will do. And all that's fair. You can have civil conversations with these guys. Good conversations with these guys. I don't like Canelo, but ... I don't like Canelo, but I enjoy what he did with Golovkin. I don't like Canelo, but I'm glad he fought that Mayweather fight. I don't like Golovkin, but he fought Lara and Trout when they said he wasn't supposed to, when he wasn't going to fight Golovkin, and he fought him. I don't like Canelo, but he fought Bivol, stepped up in weight to do it. The haters, that part is missing. But ... it's missing. I don't like Canelo. I hate him. They'll never throw out he went 47 rounds with Golovkin and Kovalev and wasn't knocked down. They'll never throw it out. They'll say stuff like, Golovkin was robbed. They don't even like Golovkin. They're just using Golovkin as a pawn in the anti-Canelo game. They're doing the same thing with Benavidez. They're doing the same thing with Charlo. They're just adopting these guys temporarily in their anti-Canelo war. That's all they're doing, because they can't be genuine. They're being disingenuous. And then they'll project their hate. They'll project their fanboyism or anti-fanboyism onto you. And we ain't giving them that to hear. You'll have the pro-Canelo channels who will call it down the middle with Canelo. And, they'll say the right things about Canelo and give him his props. But they'll reel it in on a fight week because they want to appease to these people. And I'll also address the appeasers as this show goes on. Salute D Nice. Appreciate you rolling through. I'm from the UK, but I hope Canelo has a great fight. Appreciate you rolling through as well. Punchy HLD. Appreciate you as well. Peace, my brother. Canelo has a fight book coming off surgery faster than most healthy fighters who continue to waste their prime years with inactivity. Chauncey, when's the last time we saw, we'll talk about expectation. That's another word we'll bring out throughout this show. When's the last time we saw Errol coming off a win against Ugas? A unification win against Ugas. When's the last time we saw him? Mel coming off of an undisputed victory. When's the last time we saw him? We'll have guys coming off of good things and they'll just disappear. Look at PBC's roster full of guys who just disappear for a year or two at a time. Gary Russell Jr., another one. Errol, Maul, 2 years. Where'd these guys go? Where'd they go? Where did they go? Coming off of good things. And then you have a dude who loses a fight. A lot of fighters would lick their wounds, disappear for a year or two. The dude announces a pay-per-view that does 18 million live gates 17 days after a loss. And on top of that, he'll have surgery after that, a surgery that would lay fighters up for another year or two. And then they would have to come back in a tune-up. There would have to be a tune-up. Mandatory top 6 guy. No. We got to do a tune-up. What happens? 8 months after surgery, homecoming fight. Dude's fought outside of his home country for 12 years. 12 years, and he's going back for a mandatory against a top 6 guy. And it's not good enough. First, let's hit on this breaking news. And I appreciate this super chat, Chauncey. Appreciate you rolling through. Star boxer Ryan Garcia and trainer Joe Goosen have parted ways after 3 fights. Try to get myself over here. Hold on one second. There I am. Star Garcia and trainer Joe Goosen have parted ways after 3 fights. Sources told ESPN, the last of which came versus Gervonta Davis. The pay-per-view event, Garcia's first, was a massive commercial success. He'll now campaign at 140 pounds, but no decision has been made on his next trainer. So when you hear this news, the chat, when you hear this news, what's your first, what do your instincts tell you about this? Because I was hearing, first of all, let me tell you what I was hearing coming up. And I think this is all common knowledge at this point. And a lot of people had this information that Ryan Garcia was simply training with Joe Goosen 3 days a week in sparring sessions. And then on the non-sparring days, the other 4 days a week, he's training in his camp mansion. So when I hear that, what it tells me is Ryan Garcia has his team. And I think Steve Kim is spot on because he was on this from the very beginning, but he knows Joe Goosen well. But he was spot on in his assessment in his post-fight article, Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia, the post-fight article, when he said, Joe Goosen at the end of the day was just a figurehead, a fall guy, right? It's a guy that with a name that you can, in case things go wrong, you can place the blame on. And then you simply just change trainer. We've seen fighters do this time and time again in the past. Paulie did it after the Ricky Hatton fight with Buddy McGirt. He's like, this guy's keeping me in the pocket. And, we're watching the post-fight tape. And, if we wouldn't have fought that type of fight, we would have beat Ricky Hatton. It's either them lying to themselves or they're just, to the public, you guys as a fall guy. And a lot of these trainers will knowingly step into these positions. Why? Because of the money. It's money. Joe Goosen will gladly step into the figurehead position. He'll gladly seeing that Ryan Garcia is only here 3 days a week. He's only here 3 days a week. So the other 4 days of the week, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if he's properly, but what's Joe Goosen doing in these press conferences? Oh, this camp is going great. When this guy throws a hook, oh my God. I've never seen anything like Ryan Garcia in my life. He's saying the right things. Why is he saying the right things leading up to the fight? He doesn't want to mess up his bag. They're both using each other. So you can't say, we need to play the small violins for Joe Goosen. No, Joe Goosen's using Ryan Garcia like Ryan Garcia is using Joe Goosen. Joe Goosen will be the fall guy. He'll be the figurehead. And with Joe Goosen, he'll gladly oblige because he wants that bag. He wants that money that comes along with it. Whatever it is, the 10% they agreed to, the 5%, whatever it is they agreed to, he gets his bag. He walks away happy. He doesn't even have to show up at the press conference. As soon as that fight is over, he's out. Peace. I'm going to gamble. I'm out. Just like Bernard and Oscar. Bernard and Oscar. I'm out. Peace. Peace. I'm out. I got my bag. I got what I was here for. I'm gone. Because it seems to be, what is the common denominator here? It's, what did we hear from Reynoso? What did we hear from Canelo when Ryan Garcia was in camp? This guy just doesn't care. He doesn't care about his career. He's not here to train. He's here for the Instagram likes. He's not dedicated to his craft. He's not dedicated to his sport. He does not fit in with me and Oscar Valdez. Why? Because we're in here working. We're in here putting in sweat, blood, equity for our craft, for legacy. And this guy doesn't care about legacy. He cares about the Instagram likes, the bag, whatever it may be. And we could be, time will tell, right? Because leading up to the fight, I said Ryan Garcia is doing all of the right things. He's doing all the correct things. He wants the big fight. He wants to go for the big fight. But was it he wanted the legacy that came along with it, or did he just want the bag? Did he just want the Instagram likes? Time will tell with that. But what is a red flag is when fighters go through trainers in different camps, like Instagram models go through filters. Like NBA players go through Instagram models. That's a red flag. It's a red flag. When Reynoso is saying, you know what, this guy, he's not what we thought he was. He doesn't seem dedicated. Canelo says the same thing. You hear people in the camp say the same thing. When he's the guy who's having trouble fitting in with these camps, maybe it's him. Maybe he's the one. When Joe Goosen does the same thing Reynoso does, he's not out there saying it, but not being at the post-fight press conference and then a split a week later tells us what we need to know, right? I'm the guy, I don't throw fighters away after losses. I always leave that open door as well, that I could be fans of these fighters going forward. I hope Ryan Garcia fights the fights at 140. I hope Ryan Garcia wins legitimate titles at 140, because as many faces of the sport we have, as many stars that we have in the sport, particularly when they're well-earned stars, it's better for the sport. The rising tide lifts all boats. It's better for the sport as a whole if Ryan Garcia goes forward and wins big fights and fights the big fights and fights meaningful fights and cares about legacy. That's good for the sport. But when I see these red flags right here, when I see a week later, and this is already after Reynoso, star boxer Ryan Garcia and trainer Joe Goosen had parted ways after 3 fights, what's that tell me? Those red flags are there. And I've seen fighters do this at a certain point, right? Like I said, I talked about Malignaggi. Malignaggi was already a champion by that point. He had made it up to top 2, top 3 at 140 at that point. Same with AJ. AJ's went on his 3rd trainer, but AJ is already an accomplished boxer. So at this point, AJ is going to be what he's going to be. But even with AJ, even a champion, we say, if this guy is switching trainers this much, what do we expect of AJ going forward? And we're not seeing any sort of adjustments made as he switches trainers. We're still seeing the same guy. Maybe he's lying to himself. Perhaps he's using these guys as fall guys. Who knows? Who knows? Arturo Gatti fires Buddy McGirt as well. And then what happens? He goes with Mickey Ward. What that tells you is he simply wanted to train himself at that point. But one thing we knew was Arturo Gatti already had an identity. He already had the identity as a fighter. And he was to that point already where you could say, I can see that guy training himself. I could just see him training with his best friend who he has a lot in common with and still have success. But a 24-year-old prospect / contender, it's a red flag when he's already about to go to his 3rd trainer. Boxing historian, appreciate you rolling through. I don't know what that means. John Ryder, a live dog, tough fight for Canelo. I don't know if I would call him a live dog, but he's a legitimate opponent. And I'm about to get, let's see. True Ryan never paid Eddie. Ryan did not look like he had all those game plans he was saying at the press conference. And this is the key difference between Ryan and Tank in hindsight. And what was the big difference between those two, and you saw it come out in the fight. And it was there before, and you saw it come out in the fight. And we should have seen the red flags before. I think we ignored them, but they were there. But the big difference between those two is discipline. And also, Tank Davis, you see it with this team. He'll have like these public explosions, right? He'll have these public explosions when it comes to Floyd Mayweather, Leonard Ellerbe. He'll lash out at these guys publicly, and they'll lash back out at him. And all this will play out publicly, much like Phil Jackson, Kobe Bryant. Remember Phil Jackson, Kobe Bryant, Shaq? Phil Jackson would he would play these mind games through the media. If he couldn't get to these guys directly in the locker room, he would use the media to get to these guys and wake them up. And a lot of times it would get ugly and play out publicly because that's what Phil Jackson wanted. And I think you see a lot of those same things with Tank and Floyd. They'll use the public to get to each other when they can't go through text or a phone call or personally get to each other and see eye to eye. They'll have these lash outs. But what happens? Fight week, them dudes are locked in. Tank, Leonard didn't even have to be there. Leonard's not promoting the fight, but I'm assuming Tank wanted him to be there. Floyd's there. Not even promoting the fight. Al, they're locked in with Al. They're locked in with the Watson crew. They're all locked in. Ford, Calvin Ford, they're all locked in as a team. Lockstep, one common goal on fight week. They all put it to the side and they lock in. No chaos. There may be chaos months before, but closer you get to the fight, the more locked in these dudes are. The more they are a team. The more cohesion you have. When it was Ryan, what did we see? This is one way you could tell is when Ryan Garcia had that first round and he won the first round, and it was a boring first round, and that's what Ryan wanted. And you saw Joe Goosen in the corner give him proper instructions. Joe Goosen is telling, that is a beautiful round, because it was. And Joe Goosen is telling him, this is the type of round we want going throughout the fight. The more boring the fight is, the better for us. And we spoke about it. I think anybody who went into that fight and was looking for a game plan that would be successful for Ryan Garcia said, do not jump on Tank Davis. He starts slow anyway. So you can win some rounds and conserve energy for when he steps it up in the middle rounds. But what did Ryan do? Joe Goosen's telling him, great round, continue to do that. Once he do, second round, he just jumps on Tank. And that's that disconnect. And then you see in the post-fight press conferences, Bernard's not there. Oscar's not there. And you can say, yeah, Oscar and Bernard aren't there. Al's not there either. So it doesn't matter, but Joe Goosen's not there either. So I think Ryan had the people around him. We were probably reading too much in there. Ryan probably had the people around him before the fight at his camp mansion that he wants around him. Everybody else is a figurehead. Everybody else is interchangeable. You know, I don't expect Ryan to be with Golden Boy long term. I think he's looking at Oscar like, you're interchangeable. Bernard's interchangeable. Joe Goosen's interchangeable, just like Eddie Reynoso, Canelo. I don't need Canelo to boost my career. That's what Ryan's saying. I don't think he has that humbleness. I don't think Ryan's looking at it like, look, man, Reynoso is well-known in Mexico. This whole camp is well-known in Mexico. I'm Mexican-American. I can use that to my advantage. Not to just grab the American Instagram audience. I can get the hardcore Mexican fans on my side as well. I can maybe learn some Espanol, pick up some Rosetta Stone, and it would help me and serve me well throughout my career. I don't think he's there. I don't know if he's there. I just feel like everybody around his inner circle, like outside of his inner circle, is interchangeable. It's like Teddy Atlas's book. When Michael Moore lost to George Foreman, and Teddy Atlas talks about being in the elevator after the fight, and Michael Moore, who had a big entourage leading up to the fight of people around him when he was undefeated, he's heavyweight champion, and he's looking around. It's him and Teddy in the elevator, and he says, Michael turns to Teddy and says, "Where'd everybody go?" And Teddy said, "It's everybody. It's everybody." You know, and it could be that way and the opposite. Ryan, I think everybody's interchangeable around him besides his inner circle. He's identified who he wants around. And I think people are still missing the point because people are throwing out names to me like Freddie Roach. If he goes with Freddie Roach, if he goes with this guy, if he goes with that guy. What I'm telling you is if he goes with those guys, I think those guys are just going to be figureheads. I think Ryan already has his trainer, whoever it is, who's going to hold the mitts for him. Maybe he just needs a guy that he can step into that camp and use them for sparring. And I think that's what it is. And that guy's just going to be a figurehead / fall guy. I remember Khan fired Roach and it went all downhill from there. It's going to be interesting who Ryan chooses next. Some nobody stooge or a legitimate trainer. And Nando, I don't think it matters. I think he's already got his trainer, is what I'm saying. I think he's got his team. And everybody else is interchangeable. I think that's what we have here from what I'm hearing, both publicly and behind the scenes. To me, it seems Garcia isn't pulling his weight in the gym, and there's a conflict there because Garcia isn't serious enough. Interesting set of events. Wonder what transpired in the locker room after the fight that leads. And, I don't know. That part I don't know. But it just seemed like everybody who needed to be at the press conference for Ryan Garcia from Ryan Garcia's standpoint was there. Goosen was the mole. Oh, got you, live dog. Gotcha. Ryan Garcia and Tank are birds of a feather, not interested in legacy, only the bag. Hope they prove me wrong. Tank and Floyd, lifetime lovers. That whole situation was a money grab for these fools. Ryan was in there with sheer belief in himself and a bruised rib, and possibly so. I don't think anything was going to stop Ryan from fighting these fights. So you say the temperament there is good, but was that because of the bag or was that because of legacy? We'll never know. Time will probably give us a good idea, but I just hope this kid, 24 years old, with everything there for him, I hope he gets the right people around him. And I hope he does go after legacy and fight the fights, because once again, I leave my door open that I could perhaps become a fan at some point. And we don't throw guys away. We don't say they're exposed after a single loss. There's still talent there to tap into, but will he put the right team around him and humble himself in order to bring that out of himself is the key. But in hindsight, the big difference between Tank and Ryan was discipline. And it showed in the ring. You had a guy who looked like a consummate pro. Despite what we think of Tank in his resume, he looked like a great consummate pro against sort of, I don't even, do we call him a contender at this point? Contender, lower level contender. I don't know. But I hope he gets it together. And I think that comes with discipline. It comes with what Tank said after the fight. He's simply out of placement. He's throwing that left hook. It's a great left hook. It's fast. It's sharp, but he's simply out of placement. I took advantage of it. And he said it. We saw it coming in on the footage. He loads up on the left hook. He's simply out of placement. It looks good when you're doing it on Instagram, but in a real fight, I don't know. Ryan needs to get back to preschool. Should he have fought with the injury? All access revealed. I don't know. I don't know. And that's the thing. You can throw out Robert Garcia, but is Robert Garcia going to be his real trainer? This is the stuff we do not know. Canelo Alvarez, John Ryder. We got that fight coming up this Saturday. Love this fight. I wouldn't say I love it. I like the fight. There are better fights out there, but you have to put things in correct perspective. And the issue that the Canelo haters have is they have so much hatred for the dude that they can't use critical thinking. They can't put things in the proper perspective. They constantly compare apples to oranges, constantly. When they're comparing Canelo to, say, his top pound for pound peers, to other guys at 168, they're constantly comparing apples to oranges. They don't bring up his output. They don't bring up his level of opposition throughout his career. They don't bring up a lot of things. Like I said, they lack the but, ... I hate Canelo, but I hate Canelo, but that dude's got a hell of a chin. He went 47 rounds collectively with Golovkin and Kovalev, two of the best punchers in the sport, pound for pound. But they'll leave out that but ... They'll create narratives around Canelo in order to move the goalposts and more in order to move the landscape to where it constantly fits Canelo is not doing the correct thing. Constantly. And they expect other people to go along with their narratives. It ain't happening here. And by the way, y'all hit that like button as y'all come in. If you do one thing for me, hit the X on the chat, hit the like, and then bring the chat right back up. You do one thing to support the channel. Let me give you an example of what we're looking at. And let me try to get the right screenshot here. This is pound for pound. And it even happens with big publications. And once again, I like Ring. This isn't me just, picking on Ring. That's not what this is. This is what I look at. The word expectations comes to mind. Certain fighters have them. Certain fighters have high expectations, not just from fans, but from big publications. Other fighters do not. And I have no problem with that, because it's like D-Style says with the Tank fans right now, is you want your fighter to be a face of boxing, you better expect him to do face of boxing shit. If Tank wants to be the face of boxing, and by the way, I don't have a problem with faces of boxing. I don't have a problem with multiple stars. It's just, if you look at Canelo's the only fighter on the Forbes list. He's the only fighter making that type of money, 90+ million per year. He's the face of boxing. I mean, if we're looking at it technically, he's the face of boxing. It's not even a dispute. That's not even a debate. He's the face of boxing. So they'll do the thing where they say, well, there can be faces of boxing. Okay, whatever. There can be faces of boxing. Look, what I'm telling you is expectations. Expectations. Like, listen to that word, expectations. Is you expect more from certain fighters than you do other fighters, and that's not a problem. Like, if you're the face of boxing, heavy is the head that wears the crown, you should expect that. You're making 90 million a year, you should expect the things you're getting, as long as they're genuine. And the Canelo haters swerve into disingenuous stuff. We know who they are. We know who those guys are. We'll talk about that. All right, we know those channels. We know those publications. We get all that. My issue is with serious publications like a Ring magazine. Even they'll tell you expectations of certain fighters. It's like when I was a Mayweather, I considered myself a Mayweather fan, yet a Mayweather detractor. I was a huge Mayweather detractor. I was saying, dude, you shouldn't be fighting Robert Guerrero when that fight's right there. You shouldn't be fighting Marcos Maidana when that fight's there. I expect way more of you than your outrageous, divisive super fans do. I expect more of you. Expectations, right? Expectations. The problem is the Canelo haters that we talk about, these channels, these publications, these people where Canelo can do no right. If Canelo goes this way, he should have went that way. Canelo goes that way, he should have went this way. And I'll bring up a specific example of that in a minute with a screenshot. Is they can't tell you. They can't be genuine about why they're saying that stuff. They can't tell you that they have higher expectations of Canelo simply because they think he's a greater fighter than all these other guys. They can't tell you that. If you look at this specific example right here, Ring Magazine, Canelo can outpace Errol Spence 3-1 since this December 2020. He can become undisputed in that same time period. A thing that Errol Spence still hasn't accomplished. He's had 5 years to accomplish it, still hasn't accomplished it. But he can outpace him 3-1. And then in the same span where Errol Spence doesn't fight in 13 months, Canelo has fought twice. He's wrapped up a trilogy with this bitter rival. And on top of that, defended his undisputed. And on top of that, moved up a weight class and fought the guy that you have number 6 on your pound for pound list and lost. And what they're telling you is, I think by this graphic, and you could say, oh, it's just pound for pound. We shouldn't be reading too much into it. I think pound for pound in a lot of ways, if you're going to have a pound for pound list as a publication, your pound for pound list, I think it sets what your identity is as a publication. It says what your identity is as a website. Do you value resume? Do you value guys taking chances? Do you value inactivity? And what this tells me is you're valuing 0-0 in a 13-month period rather than 1-1 and the one loss being against a guy in a weight class north of you who happens to be on the pound for pound list. This is where it rubs me the wrong way. And if you're going to do that, you have to at least say that we just expect more of Canelo than Errol. And if you're going to do that, to me, you should rank the guy higher. That's how you do that. But you should at least say, come out and say, I just expect more of Canelo than I do Errol. I expect more of Canelo than I do Bud, who has been extremely inactive as well. And I like Bud. I like Errol. But it's just, what are they doing? What have they been doing? There's no activity. And I'll take it even further. Like, Errol hasn't been active since April 2022. And in that time period, Bivol beats Canelo and he beats Zurdo. And yet Errol's still here, ranked 2 spots ahead of Dimitri Bivol. It doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. And then you see Tank. I know I'm getting in the weeds here, and it has nothing to do with Canelo, but Tank pops up in the top 10 ahead of a guy in Devin Haney who has all 5 belts in the weight class, including yours. And you could say, yeah, we have a lot of Olympians who have the ring belt but aren't on the list. But you have 2 guys in the same weight class. 2 guys in the same weight class ranked ahead of the guy that has your belt. It's rough, man. It's rough. And expectations, we go back to it. This is a top 10 at 168. And I can bring up the bad left hook top 10 at 168. Who's number 6? John Ryder. Who's number 5 contender? John Ryder. So that's 2 big publications that tell us that John Ryder is a top 6 guy in the weight. Top 6 guy in the weight. Right? Anybody else fights that fight coming off of a surgery as the mandatory, and it's his first fight in his home country in 12 years and over a decade. First fight in his home country in over a decade, fighting in front of 60,000 fans, doing it, fighting the mandatory. And on top of that, a top 6 guy in the weight class. Anybody else, that's more than acceptable. That's a good fight. David Benavidez does that. Yeah, Benavidez. Oh, look at what Benavidez is doing. Oh my God, look at the run Benavidez is having, And it showed the expectations. Once again, you can't call Benavidez Canelo's boogeyman and have much lower expectations of Benavidez than you do Canelo. It's these narratives we see. This is boxing scene right here. And this is Canelo saying it. This was yesterday, I think, in the gym. When asked during the above-mentioned open workout in San Diego if Bivol at super middleweight would give him an advantage, Alvarez replied, yes, but everyone will start fucking talking. Everyone is going to fucking start saying, oh, but he bought him down in weight. That's why Bivol lost. But they didn't say anything when I bought him up in weight. And that's what Canelo's saying here. Is he's saying he sees it and he hears the talk, right? And a lot of this, what it comes from, and by the way, I think this is fair as long as you're the face of boxing. You're going to go through this stuff. Heavy's the head that wears the crown. And this is what I'm telling the Tank super fans is get ready for it. Get ready for it because you're at the stratosphere now in which there's nothing that Tank's going to be able to do right. Tank goes this way, he should have went that way. Tank goes that way, he should have went this way. Get ready for it. It's coming. You want to be the face of boxing, you do face of boxing shit, and you're going to have to deal with the growing number of haters. And that's what Canelo has to deal with. And what Canelo is saying here is, dude, you already started the narrative. And it's one of the false narratives that were started by these channels after the fight. And D-Style has explained this phenomenon to people. It's the phenomenon that these channels do not have access to Canelo. Canelo is not going to go out there and do an interview with, say, 69 Sports TV or whoever it may be. Samson's out there being tossed around like a $5 hooker around these channels. They have access to Benavidez. They have access to Benavidez's manager. So they're going to start to spread these narratives that do not make sense for Benavidez and his team. Like I said, it's not difficult to get interviews, but it's hard to keep them. But a Benavidez, somebody like that, these guys will give access of themselves to these channels. So these guys will carry the water for a Benavidez and a Sampson. They'll ignore that Sampson said, we marinated this fight for 5 years with Caleb Plant. Oh, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. They'll do that to keep the interviews. And Sampson, like I said, is being tossed around. It's easy to get. People don't realize how easy that interview is to get. But it's hard to keep it because if you push back on it, you're going to lose that interview, right? But Sampson's out there doing interviews with like 87 different channels, saying the same damn things, and he's openly saying, no, we're not going to DAZN. No, you did. Yeah, we marinated that fight for 5 years. Who cares? And nobody's going to push back on it. Nobody's going to push back on it. I'm glad some people actually asked that, but nobody's going to push back on it. That's for sure. But what I'm saying is you built up Benavidez to be Canelo's boogeyman, which doesn't make sense because that's not a style that bothers Canelo. That's the style that the same exact dude said that Canelo would love to fight. Flat-footed dude that's there to be hit, just moves in straight lines. That's the dude Canelo wants to fight, according to them. The dude that's supposed to be Canelo's boogeyman is Bivol, right? The dude who's layered, who's versatile. And he's about to fight him a second time, which is fine. Like, we can all agree that we'd rather see the Benavidez fight stylistically. It's a more fun fight. And for Canelo, it's another one of the false narratives when it comes to Canelo fans is they act like we don't want this fight. No. We want it. Believe me, we want that fight. We'd much rather that fight than Bivol for many reasons. But this is where we separate is although we all agree that we rather see the Benavidez fight, it's a bigger fight. Where we disagree is you'll say we're getting the fight because he's ducking Benavidez, which doesn't make any sense. None. It doesn't pass any of the smell tests. And what we're saying is you're not getting the Benavidez fight right now because the dude cannot drop the Bivol loss. He can't, and he's a competitor. That's why. And it's a tougher fight. You can't call it a duck. A duck is specifically what a Jose Ramirez did, right? A duck is when you fight the easier fight at the expense of the more meaningful, tougher fight. That's not what's happening here. This is Canelo going fight the tougher fight because he's always been concerned about legacy. And it's another thing the haters cannot be honest about is the dude has always been concerned about his legacy, particularly his legacy as opposed to his fellow Mexican peers. It's why undisputed specifically at a higher weight class matter to him. It's why going up in higher weights matter to him. It's his legacy as concerned to his fellow Mexican peers, his top Mexican peers of all time. He's concerned about it. So when he loses a fight to Bivol, the first thing he says is it can't end this way. And you got to be honest about why the Bivol fight's happening in September. You got to be honest, but these dudes can't be honest about anything. They have to constantly move the goalposts. And this is what Canelo's saying right here. He's like, if I fight Bivol at 168, you dudes are going to say I drained him. It was Bivol who brought up 168 right after the first fight. He's saying, look, if he wants me to fight him again, I'll do it for belts. I want to fight Beterbiev. And what we're saying is dude hasn't even fought Beterbiev. And a lot of that has to do with the WBC and Bob Arum and, different political things. But another narrative is Canelo's holding up 175 when he's not doing that. These dudes could have fought each other. Canelo didn't enact the immediate rematch clause. Bivol doesn't have to fight this fight in September. He can go wherever he would like, but he's going to fight the fight in September because he wants that bag. He wants the bag. But this is Canelo saying, if I fight the dude at 168 and I beat him, you're just going to say I drained him. And if I fight the fight at 175, you're going to say I didn't put the belts on the line. So I got to pick my poison here. I'll fight him at 175. The belts won't be on the line. But you're not going to be able to say I drained the dude. 175, no rehydration clause. I'll fight the bigger fighter. It is what it is. But he understands that there's no pleasing these dudes. And there are different types of dudes. There's two different types of dudes in this world. And this is what you learn when over time, because I was one of these people. Let me get to the super chat real quick in these comments. Real reason Nello gets all the hate is because he's MX. The bias, tribalism, hypocrisy is okay for certain fighters. And perhaps, I think it has a lot to do with a lot of things. And I appreciate this, Jesse, the super chat. I think it has a lot to do with a lot of things. A lot of it is with you, because I've seen a lot of Mexican dudes hate on Canelo too. I saw this phenomenon when I went to Canelo versus Mayweather back in 2013, so 10 years ago. You had certain Mexican dudes that did not want anything to do with Canelo. And I was of the same mind frame in 2009, 2010, when Canelo was coming up, and he's like, he's too shiny for me, and, the tight-ass golf clothes, all this stuff. But over time, you become a fan because he moves a certain way. And this is what I'm saying. We should be rewarding fighters like this. We shouldn't be fans of certain fighters and then bending the truth to hold these certain fighters. No, we're just fans of the actions of fighters. And we reward those as boxing fans because we want more of those. We want those fighters replicated. So, I mean, that's that. But these dudes make things more difficult than they need to be. But a lot of it has to do with when you see a dude, this is just, I think this is just, when you see a dude who women love him and a lot of dudes want to be him, you're just naturally going to hate these dudes. Like, I think miserable people are going to hate these dudes, like the homecoming king. Dude will drop 40 in a basketball game. He'll bag every dime in the school, and you just naturally want to hate that dude. But you got to at least do ... at the end that I'm talking about. Be a detractor. Don't be a hater of that person. Say, you know what? I can't stand that dude. Can't stand him. He seems like a dick, but I got to at least respect that dude can drop 40 in a game. I got to respect that he can walk around and every girl seems to like him. If you can't bring yourself, and we know these channels, we know them, and we know why they do it. I've seen the Boo Boo Andre channels. It's easy to get the Boo Boo Andre interview. So dudes are going to say Canelo's ducking Boo Boo Andre. And then the dudes get the Samson interview. So then they'll build up the Benavidez boogeyman. And like I said, it's disingenuous because if he's the boogeyman, you should be holding him to at least as high of a standard as Canelo. You should at least, like if Caleb Plant, when Canelo fought Caleb Plant, and I watched this in real time, Canelo's at 160, and I'm being told if Canelo would never move up to 168 because Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant and they're both white chocolate. Them dudes are slick. Them dudes, they have the style that's always giving Canelo problems. Lateral movement. And then Canelo, what happens? Canelo moves up to 168, and he signs to fight Billy Joe Saunders, and all of a sudden, Billy Joe becomes Billy Ho. All of a sudden, they start to move those goalposts again. Nah, Billy Joe, he's not white chocolate anymore. And then he beats Billy Joe, and then in a 22-foot ring. And then what happens? He signs to fight Caleb Plant. And then he signs to fight Caleb Plant, and that's when the big stuff. Oh, he's signing for Undisputed, but he's actually ducking he's ducking Benavidez to fight the Undisputed fight. Is that what you're telling me? A year and a half, 2 years ago, this is a dude he wouldn't have fought. That's what you were telling me. Now he's fighting the fight, and now the weakest undisputed run of all time. Now it's a weak division. Then Canelo goes to fight Bivol, and now all of a sudden it's a strong division again. Now all of a sudden it's strong. And not only is it strong, but the guy who's number 6 in the weight class is a Eurobum. Make that make sense. I witnessed the same type of mental gymnastics when Terrence Crawford signed to fight Evanesyan. It was welterweight division's the greatest division of all time. That's what they were telling me. Something like that. Something to that extent, right? Because it's full of PBC fighters. Look at this strong division. Look at how talented it is. 7 undefeated fighters in the top 10. And then Bud Crawford signs to fight a guy in the top 10, and the guy's a bum. I'm asking myself, and I'm asking them, how is this guy in the top 10 in this extremely talented division, yet he's a bum? It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense because it's not supposed to make sense. These dudes don't make sense. They're just trying to muddy the waters. And nothing certain fighters do will ever be good enough for them. And it's sad because boxing's at the expense of this stuff. You know, Errol Spence and his fans might see him top 4 pound for pound in publications and think it's okay to be inactive. It's all right. It's completely fine. Completely fine. But, you know, Canelo fights Caleb Plant undefeated for undisputed, and it's meh, yeah, okay, to some of these people. But then you see Benavidez fight Caleb Plant after Canelo beats him a year earlier, and he's reinventing the wheel to these, not detractors, these haters. And you'll understand these channels as they go on, because you'll see, like, all right, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. This does, and it all involves the same fighter. Wait, you had Canelo losing to Trout. You had him losing to Lara. You had him losing both fights to Golovkin, and you found a way to either have the third Golovkin fight close or possibly even a draw or a close loss. What? What? Who cares? Let them hate. And that's fine. That's what I'm saying is, but you still point it out. You still point it out. You don't just ignore, you still point it out. And there are two types of people, and I learned this from the art of being hated, the art of not caring what people think, because it's the greatest superpower you can have. And as you grow older, you realize this is when you're not afraid to move, when you're not paralyzed by fear, by people who, you know, they don't have your best interests at heart. These people, whatever you do, they're going to find something wrong with it. Even people around you who you perceive to like you or even love you, some of them don't want the best for you. And the best, the greatest super talent you could have is the art of not caring what people think, and the art of being hated, the art of just simply not caring what people think. And it's tough to develop. It takes a lot of time. It took me many years. 10 years ago on here, I would have been an appeaser. I would have been like, oh, you know, let's reel it in a little bit. Let's reel it in for these people. You know, let's try to hear their, no, I've heard it already. I've heard it already. There's two types of people. There's if the person across the street from you thinks a certain way about you and hates you for it, you know, you try to walk across the street and explain to somebody, that person, why you're not that person. Then there's the second person. And this person becomes a superhero over time, becomes super successful, is they see that person across the street, they don't care. They don't care to cross the street to explain to them why they're that way, are perceived to be that way. And on top of that, you might even give them more of that. You think I'm a Canelo super fan? You think I'm a Canelo fanboy? Whatever you say, guess what? I'm going to give you more Canelo content then. Because screw you, that's why. That's why. I don't care what you think. It's fine with me. I'm a boxing channel at the end of the day. What's the mission statement here? It's boxing fans speaking to other boxing fans about how we can further our agenda as boxing fans. No fanager zone. So that person across the street might see me as a fanager, and that's not what it is. What have we explained on this channel before? And it takes a while to get it, is we're not a fan of fighters. We're a fan of certain actions, the actions of fighters. And we become a fan of that fighter by extension. Right? So Canelo moves a certain way over time, and you say, that's that dude. That's that dude. And I'm going to become a fan of him and start, you know, spreading what this guy is doing. And these narratives you have to push back on, because these narratives take hold. And why did these narratives take hold? Why did they take hold? It's because of the phenomenon that D-Style explained. Is you see Samson on 87 channels, there's a reason he's doing it. And you might even say, like, why is Samson on this channel when like only 5 people are watching? Why is Samson on this channel when it gets like 70 views? Why is that? Samson just knows he's going to flood the zone. I'm going to go to this channel, this channel, this channel, this channel, this channel to flood the zone and get this narrative moving, because Samson has already explained. What has Samson explained on all of these channels? It's a common theme, is we've already got our contract. to fight Morrell Jr. We've already got a 3-fight contract. We're keeping these fights in-house. We're not going over to the zone. But what are they going to do? They'll continue to mention Canelo's name. Clout chase, clout chase, clout chase. And it's smart. It's smart to do it this way. Because these channels, they want access to Benavidez. They want access to his team. So they'll hold water for these guys. They'll push these false. They know it's false. Come on. They know it. But they'll continue to push it because they love having that access. They love what comes along with it. They love that they can keep tapping into that well and get those interviews, right? But they know these narratives are false. These narratives just continue to crumble, and nobody ever reads the scoreboard. It's like he wants to fight Bivol at 168 to drain him, and he's saying, "I never said that." But that's these narratives they push. And Canelo doesn't give the channels access. He'll go to a Fight Hub TV. He'll go somewhere like that. He'll go to Dan Rafael. He's not going to go to, like I said, a 69 Sports TV, a Fred Barbershop. He's not going to go to those places. Right? So these guys aren't going to hold weight for Canelo. They'll hold weight for Boo Boo. They'll hold weight for David. They'll hold weight for Charlo, who hasn't fought in 2 years. And when people say this, when people say, because it's fully okay to say, you know what, I'm not into the John Ryder fight. I might not even buy it. That's fine. Like some people see 7-1. I understand. And that's where level-headed people are. That's where the detractors are, right? And that's fair. Is yes, I understand Ryder's an acceptable opponent. He's top 6. I'm just not excited about the matchup stylistically. And I don't think it's worth the price point. All of that is fair. All of that's fair. What you're not going to say is John Ryder sucks. John Ryder's a Euro bum, because John Ryder is the only 168-pounder with 2 top 10 168-pound victories in 2022. When Charlo was MIA, mental health, whatever he's got on the milk carton, when Boo Boo is fighting nobody, does nothing, MIA in 2022. When Benavidez in 2022 fought a 50-year-old David Lemieux, what was John Ryder doing? Beating Danny Jacobs, beating Zach Parker, 2 top 10 guys. Beating them, working. While Boo Boo Andrade is avoiding Zach Parker twice, not once, but twice, on top of ducking Janabek at the same time, not once, but twice. John Ryder simply said, I'll fight Zach Parker. Zach Parker. Who cares? Fight him. Fights him and he wins. So what I'll tell him is, okay, you have a problem with John Ryder. Who would you have rather seen him fight? That's the question, is John Ryder as opposed to what? John Ryder as opposed to who? Don't look at it in concrete terms. John Ryder as opposed to who? And you'll hear the names they throw out. Charlo. And you'll explain to him, Charlo hasn't fought in 700 days. Charlo's never fought at 168. Yeah, but he's better than John Ryder. He's better than how do you know? How do you know? He's not doing anything. He's simply not doing anything. How do you know? Boo Boo Andrade. Boo Boo Andrade has never fought anybody. How do you know? How is that more acceptable? Explain it to me. It's more acceptable because you're American and you have this elitism American mind state when it comes to boxing. Euro fighters are Euro bums. And I've seen American fight fans do this, right? They'll see this resume right here. I want y'all to look at this. Let me take this comment down. They'll say stuff like, Canelo doesn't fight. I don't want to bring race into a specific type of fighter. And then they'll see this resume, the same channels, and they'll say it's acceptable. Garcia, Romero, Cruz, Barrios, Cruz, Gamboa, Nunez, Ruiz, Queller, Fonseca. They all have something in common besides it's pedestrian. They all have something in common. They are all not something, and they are all something. And the last name gives you a clue as to what that is. It's not just eye test. That's not what it is. It's They'll say stuff like Canelo doesn't fight slick black fighters. Just call it what it is. And you'll point out that 168, 175, they're simply not there. And then these guys, you're saying Charlo is not slick. Bubu Andre may be slick, but he was slick at 160 and he's slick against nobody. And then you'll see that resume full of pedestrian Hispanic fighters, many of them coming in weight class from Tank Davis, and it's ignored. It's ignored. Expectations. And I'll bring it up again. It's expectations. It's people will tell you how they value a fighter by their expectations of their fighter. Just pay attention to them, listen to them, and they'll tell you what they think about a certain fighter. Canelo fights Bivol and he's ducking Charlo and Boo Boo, and it doesn't matter who he fights. He's going to be ducking those fighters anyway. And like I said, you don't pay attention to what's going on across the street. You simply troll them. You do anything, you troll them. You give them more of it. Double, triple up on it. Thank you for keeping unbiased and truthful. Is John Ryder he's a good opponent. He's a legitimate opponent. He's a top 6 opponent. It's a good win, particularly when you take everything into perspective. When you take everything into proper perspective, it's a good fight. Going back home after a decade, mandatory, top 6 guy. As opposed to who? As opposed to guys who simply aren't accomplishing anything in the division. He's the only super middleweight with 2 super middleweight wins. Period. Point blank, period. And we're going to disagree with this on this boxing historian. We're going to disagree with it. Ryder is plus 800, isn't the worst pick in the world. Canelo lost 2 fights, were not impressive, and Ryder is feeling himself right now. And that's fair. That's fair. Nando is you might throw a little money down. You might say he's a live dog. You might say that. I just think Canelo is going to come in there, and I think he's going to destroy him at home. I think we're going to get an early knockout. And what you're going to have is the big fight feel. You're going to have the king of boxing, the face of boxing, if we want to use that term, riding back in and saying, look, I had a loss last year, had an injury, but I just took 8 months off. This original plan that I had is just being backed up 5 months. I'm right back at it. And I still think I'm the pound for pound king. This is going to be Canelo saying this stuff. And I'm coming back home. I'm making a statement. And then I'm going to fight Bivol in September. Why? Because I'm Canelo. And I'm not going to allow that loss. It's not going to sit well with me. That's what he's going to be saying. One set of standards is what expected of Canelo. Another standard for everyone else. Seems it's crazy, honestly. And it is. It is. They just talk shit daily. That's what they do. I've had cats say they want to kill me and chop my ear off just because I told the truth about they. And I've seen those disputes. VH, I've seen those disputes. And it's not that serious to me, but I do enjoy trolling these dudes because they take everything so seriously and they're so wrong. They're so wrong. It comes with the territory for Canelo. He's got to deal with it. When you're making that type of money, when you're the face of boxing, you got to deal with that. And nobody should be out over there whining about why that is. All we're doing is explaining to you that you have higher expectations of Canelo for a reason. And you need to start being genuine about why that is. You can't continue to bend the truth around Canelo to fit your original assumptions of Canelo that you were wrong about. It's easier for you to just come out and say my assumptions of the guy were wrong. I had to do that with many fighters. I had to do it with Canelo. I had to do it with Oscar. I didn't want to like Oscar. I didn't like that dude. I think Oscar's a cornball. That dude is a fighter. Oscar was a killer. Oscar fought everybody. What is there to dislike as a fighter? Cotto. Like, what? Some of these dudes, why would I like these dudes other than what they do inside the ring? But it's easier to say, I'm going to always leave the door open for fighters to prove me wrong. If Tank Davis goes from fighting strictly Hispanic fighters, moving up in weight or draining them, etc., and then decides, you know what? Devin Haney doesn't have to um, identify as a Cuban fighter to get the fight with me. Shakur Stevenson doesn't have to play the Puerto Rican angle. I'm just going to simply fight the best fights. Lomachenko doesn't have to, pretend to be a light-skinned Dominican to get the fight with me. I'm simply going to fight the best fights out there. If he makes that 180 and fights those fights, whether he wins or loses, I'm his biggest fan. If Ryan makes a 180 and cares about his career, I'm his biggest fan, win or lose. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not personally invested in these guys. I don't care about these guys personally. It's why Top Rank ESPN bothers me, is I get tired of Mark Kriegel waxing poetic about these fights. Just simply get to the fights. I care about what they do in the ring. Mark Kriegel is there saying, oh, his parents were killed by, a boulder rolled down a mountain and killed his parents when he was 6. And he's been homeless since he was 6 years old, living in a station wagon. And look how far. I don't care, Mark. Show the fight. I'll base whether I like a fighter on what he's doing inside of the ring. Point blank, period. I don't need to hear all that stuff. I'm not emotionally and personally invested in these fighters. I don't care. I'm a boxing fan. I care about what happens in the ring. So what I'm saying is, it's easy when you're not emotionally invested. It's easy when you don't do the fighter and trainer interviews, because you do the interviews and you get access to Samson and you feel like you have to get knee pads and hold water for David Benavidez or Boo Boo Andrade or whoever it may be. You don't get emotionally and personally invested in the fighters. And it's easier to do this. It's easier to call it up the middle. So if a Tank makes a 180, I'm his biggest fan. If David Benavidez goes down this route that they're talking about, where he fights Caleb Plant, then he fights Morrell Jr., then he possibly fights and these guys fight each other, I'm David Benavidez's biggest fan. Right here. You're looking at him. I don't have to have access to him or his manager to become his biggest fan. Here I am. He earned it. I'm his biggest fan now. That's all he had to do was fight the fights. Biggest fan. He beats Canelo, he beats Canelo. Whatever it is. However the chips may be. Why can't these dudes just watch the process play out and then just be honest about how the process is playing out? How the landscape is developing itself. So if these dudes see Canelo fight Trout, and then fight Mayweather, and then fight Lara, and then fight Golovkin 3 times, and fight Bivol, and become undisputed at 168, and they're left with still, he doesn't fight anybody. He's ducking Benavidez. If Canelo fights Bivol at 175, and they're saying he doesn't want to put his belts on the line, and then he fights him at 160, oh, he's draining Bivol. It's never going to be good enough for them. It's just funny to watch. What these fruitcakes won't mention is Andre, Jamal, and Benavidez's entire careers combined have beaten the same amount of champs Nello beat. And that's facts. That's where I have an issue with this. So it's easy to say, just let them be who they are. But once again, when they flood the zone with these channels and these narratives start to take hold and people actually start to believe that Canelo wants to fight Bivol at 168 and drain him, that Canelo is ducking Benavidez. When people start to believe this stuff and you start to see these things take hold and take shape, you have to push back on it. You can't just say, oh, just let those dudes be those dudes over there. No, because they're loud. Those who know the least know it the loudest. They're loud. They're loud. Samson knows what he's doing. All these guys know what they're doing. Some of these channels know what they're doing, pushing these false narratives. Some of them are just too stupid to know. Yeah, there's that too. Some of them are just dumb. But it's important to properly educate people and say, at the end of the day, All things in proper perspective. Canelo versus Ryder is a good fight. It's a good. Ryder is a good super middleweight. Is he great? No. Should Canelo win this fight by knockout? Yes. Yes. Is Canelo a 16-1 favorite? Yes, absolutely. But also Canelo has been overvalued. He's known to be overvalued with betting odds coming into fight. He was a 5.5-1 favorite against Bivol. So if you want to throw a little money down on John Ryder, it's probably a smart play just to throw a little money down just in case. But you have to properly educate people on what this is, because if a Benavidez, if a Charlo's fighting this fight, it's a great fight. Canelo's fighting this fight, it's a good fight, and it is a good fight. It's not a great fight. It's not a great matchup. It's a good matchup. It's an acceptable, and it's a opponent. But it's acceptable. It's good. It's legitimate. Plant was a good opponent for Canelo, according to them, or Plant was overrated, but Benavidez, Plant was a great fighter. And why is that? You got to be honest about why that is expectations. You just expect more of Canelo because he's the face. You expect more of Canelo because you think he's great. And you got to be honest about that. You can't constantly bend truth. You can't constantly move goalposts. You can't constantly move the landscape to say, no, yeah, he won that fight, but he did that because of that. Yeah, he's going to fight Bivol, but he's ducking Benavidez. If he fights Benavidez, he's ducking Charlo. If he fights this guy, he's ducking that guy. If he fights this guy at 168, he should have fought him at 175. If he fights him at 175, he should have fought him at 168. He lost the first two Golovkin fights. The third one may have even been a draw. It was a close fight. You know, he might have gotten a gift there. And then he lost to Trout. He lost to Lara. You know, and, you know, you were against running. But now when it comes to Lara, you're okay with it. It's constant. It's constant. It's exhausting. But you just point it out. Point it out. What we have with Canelo, you know, I'll just tell people this is you gotta appreciate what you have while you have it. I said the same thing about Chocolatito, and I continue to say the same thing about Chocolatito. You're not gonna get these type of fighters. You're gonna get them few and far between. You're not gonna get them as much. You're not gonna get guys fight 60 to 70 something fights, rack up that type of resume, have 40 knockouts. Go 37 rounds combined with the likes of Golovkin and Kovalev and not get knocked down. You're just not going to have that. That stuff is going extinct, fellas. You got to enjoy it while it's around. You got to be able to say that, like 37 rounds with the likes of Golovkin and Kovalev combined, and you don't get knocked down. You got to appreciate greatness while it's here. You can't have an assumption of a guy coming in and then continue with that assumption of the guy 10, 15 years later when he's proven you wrong so many times. Sometimes, man, it's just better. And these are good. Some of these dudes are good dudes, but they're so blinded by hatred. They have so much hatred down there when it comes to certain fighters that they can't just admit that this guy proved me wrong. He proved me wrong. I still don't like the guy. I'll still cheer against him. That's fair. It's fair to say 150 weight. I didn't like that. I didn't like when he tagged that rehydration clause, you know, tainted meat, whatever it may be. All that's fair, but you have to be able to say, but ... he's a net positive. But he's got a great chin. But he's a great counterpuncher. But he's a great fighter. He beat this guy and he beat that guy and he beat those guys despite me saying he wasn't going to fight those guys. But what instead they do is erase that, start again. Erase that, start again. Erase that, start again. That Floyd and Canelo had beat a certain amount of champs isn't fair to the old guys when there wasn't the same amount of champs to beat. That's fair. That's fair. Canelo should and will stop Ryder. I agree. Canelo has beaten the same amount of champions as Floyd Mayweather. There isn't another active champion to compare him in terms of resume and just resume. It's resume. It's resume. It's eye test is very deceptive. When you take a certain amount of a certain percentage of fights off of paper and put them into reality, a lot of those fights are not going to go the way you thought they would. I say it about Carl Froch all the time because he's the greatest example of it. He was an underdog in 8 of his last 12 fights, and he ended up winning 10 of those 12 fights. So that was Vegas. That was fans saying he's supposed to lose 8 of these 12 fights, but he goes and he wins 10 of those 12 fights. You got to take fights off of theory and put them into reality. And that's the beautiful thing. And this is what I appreciate about certain fighters is they take those fights off of paper and they put them into reality. I'm a fan of fighters who take as many of those fights we want to see off of paper and put them into reality, because that's when we tell who these fighters really are. We know who Canelo is. And I despise these dudes from a boxing sense, because I don't hate anybody, but from a boxing sense, I despise these dudes who try to tell you otherwise because they're doing it at the expense of boxing. I'm not a fan, despite if I'd rather hang out with these dudes outside of boxing, if I might look like them, despite all that, I'm not a fan of fighters who these fights that are on paper, they leave them on paper. I'm not here to make excuses for fighters who I would otherwise rather hang out with. I would otherwise like outside of boxing, but they leave the fights on paper. I'm not going to make excuses for these fighters. I'm not. That's not what I'm here for. You can call me whatever you want. I'm not going to make excuses for these fighters that are keeping the fights that I want on paper. I'm not going to sit up here and listen to managers tell me that I kept that fight on paper for 5 years because that's what I wanted to do. And nobody pushed back on it. No. That's disgusting. Yeah. You got managers openly saying, yeah, I'm marinating fights. I'm marinating fights. Just because. Take it. I'm not for the marinators. No. I'm for the fighters who are fighting the fights. I'm for the fighters who I know who they are. I've identified who they are. I know they're going to continue with that track record. I trust them to continue with that track record. And they give me a clear and concise plan as to where they're going to go in the future, even after they've done all this. Yep. I'm going to go home. I'm going to fight John Ryder. Mandatory top 6 guy. Only super middleweight who beat 2 top 10 super middleweights last year. I'm going to do that 8 months removed from my last fight with surgery in between it. And then I'm going to fight the guy who beat me right before then. And then we'll get to Benavidez. That's the beautiful thing about it for the Benavidez fans out there. I've been telling you this works out better for you anyway, because you're the ones telling me it's better if it continues to get pushed off because Canelo just continues to age. And on top of that, if a fight is in demand, Canelo's going to give it to you. It may not be within 6 months. It may not be. He's going to give it to you within 12 to 18 months. That's the good news for the Benavidez fans. You're going to get that fight. And when that fight is signed, when Canelo versus Benavidez is signed, whenever that may be, I don't want to see you go from, look at us, Benavidez fans, Mexican monster, look at us. Our chests are out now. Our shoulders are back. We got that win against Plant. We're big news now. I don't want to see you go from that to slouching all of a sudden and start to move those goalposts again and say, Canelo beat Benavidez, but look at this other guy over here. Look at Morrell Jr. He's looking good. We don't want to see that. Say it with your chest. Say it with your chest before the fight sign. Because a lot of you dudes aren't saying it with your chest. A lot of you dudes were saying, Billy Joe's that guy at 168. Caleb's that guy at 168. Golovkin's that guy at 160. Lara's that guy at 154. And you were saying it with your chest until you were no longer saying it with your chest. What happened? You were emasculated. And you just can't admit that you were wrong. That's all it takes, man. Sometimes it's better to just say you were wrong. It is what it is. It is what it is. We see you. We've identified why you think the way you think. We've identified detractors are fair from haters. We've identified why we point these guys out, why we pay attention to them and push back on the narratives, because of why the narratives take hold. The narratives take hold because they flood the zones amongst these channels and push these narratives forward. And we'll go forward with our Canelo fight week, and we're not going to tailor our content and reel it back in to appease to these people. Canelo fight week, the face of boxing is back. I'm out. Peace. God bless.